All right. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, we can hear you loud and clear.
Perfect. My name's Elliot Garbus. I'm going to be talking about updating the ScrollView widget, one of the core widgets in Kivy. And I'm a retired high-tech executive. And in my retirement, I've become a Python enthusiast and a Kivy enthusiast. So first, I want to acknowledge really everyone who's done work on Kivy. It's a rather remarkable framework. And in particular, the scroll view file has seen a tremendous amount of contributions, 37 contributors, 223 commits, with an initial commit going back to 2011. So really standing on the shoulders of giants. There are plenty that have come before me. So what I'm going to walk through today are some of the problems that I was looking to address in this update, talk about my journey and the kind of the path that I took to get here. I'm going to summarize the improvements. Along the way, I also found some issues with the damp scroll effect, talk about fixing those, and then close with a few demonstrations. If you have any questions, I'd invite you to submit them, and hopefully we can have a few minutes at the end to go over those. So the key issues that existed or that exists really in the version 2.3.1 scroll view was no support for orthogonal nesting. That is putting a horizontal in a vertical or a vertical in a horizontal. There was some limited support for parallel nesting, but this really didn't work either. It had some issues with the effects didn't work right. The code itself had really been touched by many, as I called about earlier. It was very difficult to understand and obviously maintain. Some of the issues in particular, state is managed in the touch user dictionary. There was no documentation of the keys. I found a number of dead keys, and there are very long methods. And while I'm going to be referring to scroll view for this presentation, recycle view is a scroll view. So all the features that I'm going to be talking about apply both to scroll view, and because recycle view inherits by scroll view, recycle view also gets the new features. So the journey, I initially attempted to add simply orthogonal nesting support to the existing code base, making really minimal change. I got it close, but there were a bunch of issues. And one of the things that made it very difficult for me to reason about the code was that recursive event handling had been added as a way to support scrolling. So there are three events in scroll view: on scroll start, on scroll move, on scroll end. Those events were recursive and used to send events down the widget tree to nested scroll views, again, making it difficult to reason about. So that initial attempt failed. And then I thought, okay, if I create another widget, which I called the nested scroll view manager, that I put outside two scroll views, I'll have a very clear outer scroll view and inner scroll view. And this will be very easy to reason about. And I put that together and I was delighted that it worked. And then thinking about having to write up documentation for a nested scroll view manager had me scratching my head. And I realized that there's really no reason to have that extra widget. That scroll view works by using the touch user dictionary. I could use that to identify what's the outer scroll view and the inner scroll view. So that led to the third version, which was very similar to the second version, but I got rid of that nested scroll view manager. But I was still limited to only an inner and the outer scroll view. And then finally, I said, okay, let me move to unbounded nesting. So on an on touch down, I actually go from the outer scroll view and march down the widget tree and build a data structure that describes what's nested, and then use that to manage nesting and nesting behavior. As I was doing this work, when you move from just an inner and outer to unbounded nesting, suddenly you find how you want content scrolling and the mouse wheel to work becomes very confusing. I'm very thankful to the Kivy Discord users for their suggestions, in particular to use the web style best known methods for both the content scrolling and the wheel, which is what I ended up implementing, and I'll describe in more detail. So along the way, there were a number of improvements made. Again, primarily the support for nesting. Events in the version 2.31, these events actually mirror the touch events. They didn't provide what was expected, and those events were created to support that non-standard recursive events that I already described. In the new version, the events fire when scrolling starts, continues, or stops. And the stop is defined as an on touch up and 3 consecutive frames with no movement. So that even though an on touch up happens and there's some momentum, it's not until that momentum is exhausted that the on scroll stop fires. I support dwelling on text now, or I should say the new version supports dwelling on text. In the version 2.3.1, if you would hold on a widget in a scroll view that didn't consume a touch, so not a button, but a label, what would happen is the touch would expire after 55 milliseconds, and you'd have to do a release and touch again in order to start a scroll. In the new version, dwelling on a label, the touch gets automatically converted to a scroll. So you can touch a label, stay in position, and then scroll later. There are 3 new properties that I defined to support some of the new capabilities, and I'll walk through those shortly. And then developer documentation. It was actually quite a challenge getting my arms around scroll view. I've refactored the code and increased the developer documentation considerably. This is not just what shows up on the website, but many of the comments in the code. Okay, so there are a set of rules for parallel and shared access scrolling. Again, this is really the same as the way the web works. So if an inner scroll view is at an inner boundary when a touchdown happens, and I move away from that boundary, so effectively I'm dragging away from the boundary, then it's going to immediately delegate to the outer scroll. If I'm at that inner boundary again, but now I move toward it, then the inner scroll is going to move, and there's no delegation that's going to happen in that touch. And if I'm not at a boundary and I move in any direction, the inner scroll is going to scroll, and there's never any mid gesture delegation. The new property parallel delegation can be set to false to disable parallel delegation completely. Okay. Wheel behavior in nested scroll views uses the web style delegation both for the mouse scroll wheel and for scrolling gestures on a trackpad. And that is only the innermost scroll view under the pointer or cursor will handle the wheel event, and there's no propagation to an outer scroll view. 2 other new properties, delegate to outer. I'm going to be showing this in one of the demos. Uh, when it's true, you get the natural behavior that um, uh, cross-access gestures, in an orthogonal case, delegate to outer. Parallel at boundaries, as I just described, delegate to outer. When it's false, you're basically locking touch scrolling to a specific nested level. Then in slow device support, which defaults to false, this is actually a performance enhancement. In 2014, there was a fix made to support slow devices that uh, allowed 3 frames to accumulate to get enough velocity data. This adds about 150 milliseconds of, 50 milliseconds of delay. So by default now, I've removed this because I don't know what's coming in terms of low cost and embedded hardware. I left it in as a feature, but it defaults to false. If you find you've got some hardware that is really slow and not scrolling well, you could turn this back on. Okay, also had to update the damp scroll effect. In my testing of ScrollView, I found there was a numeric instability in damp scroll. This was verified by another developer. The problems were that the scroll bar in ScrollView would stay highlighted rather than dimming and going away. Because there was a numeric instability, effectively the damp scroll would oscillate. And the biggest problem is that it wasted power. The updated damp scroll effect, which will be part of 3.0, has mathematically guaranteed stability and also, as a consequence, more usable tuning parameters, which I'll share as we move into the demos. Okay, shifting to demos. So first, I'm going to take a look at the nested orthogonal recycle view. So I hope you can see this. This is a recycle view. I've got 20 panels, each with 50 items. And again, based on the capabilities of the new scroll view. Next, we'll take a look at nested orthogonals. This really shows off very much the same that we saw before. Here I've got rows. I can scroll vertically, and this is the same thing, but in a different orientation. Now moving on to nested verticals. So this is the outer and inner scrolls. With the mouse wheel, scrolling through on the inner, and you see, even though I hit the boundary, so I get that effect, it doesn't promote to the outer, but I'm on my outer edge. So actually, let's go the other way. I'm on the edge, so if I move up now, I'm locked and I can scroll using the inner scroll view. Of course, I can scroll with the outer scroll view. And we can move in both directions. Okay, so there's our nested verticals. Of course, you can also do nested horizontals as well. And then I put together a massive test to showcase what we can do now. So I have 12 configurations here that are within, you can see, a XY scroll view. So I've got a normal vertical, and you can see this is delegating to that outer. and I discuss that delegate to outer, I can turn that off, and now that outer scroll view doesn't get promoted to, because we've set delegate to outer to false. It's a simple horizontal scroll view. Again, this is in an XY. An XY. Here are 3 parallel vertical scroll views, some horizontal nested scroll views, some orthogonal, vertical and a horizontal, horizontal and a vertical, nested XY. So you've got XY in an XY. Some mixed. Three levels nested in a vertical. And then here are 3 levels of orthogonal nesting. Right, and again, inside this big XY. All right, and then in addition to those, I mentioned that there is a new damp scroll view effect. So in the example directory, I also created a test of the scroll view effect tuning parameters. The new scroll view effect models a spring and a rubber band, which lets you change these attributes. So I can reduce the string stiffness and the rubber band coefficient to change the behaviors, and I still get very nice behavior. So if you wanted to tune these parameters, they're more tunable. In the existing damp scroll view effect, it was really fine-tuned to deliver the right behavior with its default settings, and changing those settings actually created issues. This is in the Kivy examples directory in the repository, and ScrollView has also been merged. Okay, so quick summary: support for arbitrary levels of nesting. I think that's been demonstrated. The scroll events work as expected now. Dwell on text converts to a scroll. There's extensive developer documentation in scrollview.py. We've got a numerically stable damped scroll effect. And my call to action, I suggest you create some nested scroll views, try the new examples, read the code, and provide feedback or PRs. I should mention, in preparing for this, I looked at the documentation and I realized I must have done something that prevented Sphinx from creating the documentation correctly. So I'll be working on getting that fixed. So really do look at scrollview.py for the documentation in the short term. And remember, when you're doing nesting, it's very important to set scroll X and scroll Y to get the desired behavior when nesting. So that wraps up my presentation. Thanks so much for your attention. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you too. It was an impressive work actually. I didn't review it. It reviewed it someone else, so some of these things I actually missed it. But yeah, nice work, absolutely. And everyone in the chat is actually saying, "Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you." So looks like it was something that we missed and we needed actually. There's some question from the chat actually. Anyone? We give a few seconds.
All right. Again, my thanks to everybody, and thanks to the folks on the Kivy Discord who provide testing on Android and also provided some really valuable feedback and pushed me to move forward. So thanks again.
So we have a question from Felipe Mark, which is saying, what's your next project to work on? Will you tackle ScrollView?
ScrollView is, I think, tackled, right? And the first example was actually using ScrollView, again, because ScrollView is based on ScrollView. Everything that I've shown here works under ScrollView as well.
Yeah, because actually is share most of the same code. Also, Sahil looks like I have a question. Sahil, can you write it down? Taxi wasn't here for the other study. I'm not sure it has been addressed, but there are plans to remove the import open Windows side effect with 3.x. Yeah, sure, absolutely. So if we don't have any question anymore, I guess thank you, Elliot, and see you again on the Discord chat. Now we are going live with the next talk, which is from Init Bug. Please give me a second to reconfigure everything. So thank you again, Elliot, and see you again on the Discord chat.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks and goodbye.